Michael Eline. This is where I teach people the law in an unorthodox manner by using examples that we see in the news, case law briefs, but it's all about exposing the Leviathan and its instrumentalities and taking back your rights. Know the law and mean to keep it well. Come here to learn from an expert to know your right. Make sure to like and subscribe. Make sure to save, because we never know when the thought police are going to take down this channel. All right, guys. So I'm going to take you on a journey tonight. I have Max Bonilla with me, my resident historian and genius. And I'm going to go ahead and play this Brett Pike video, but go say hi really quick, Max.
Hey, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. How are we doing tonight? It's still nice outside here in California, but if you're on the central areas or in the East Coast of this country, good evening to you.
We're going to check out Brett Pike. I've had him on as a guest a couple of times before you guys were hanging out with me, but we're going to play one of his videos tonight because this guy is a homesteader and he's always busy out, doing the fields and whatnot. So here we go. Let's go ahead and play this bad chicken.
It talks about no taxation without representation, but people conveniently leave out that the American Revolution was just as much about the court system, that when people didn't pay their taxes, they were brought in front of British Vice Admiralty courts, which means instead of getting a jury of their peers, they had to be judged by this guy. The British had set up special courts and magistrates just for the colonies. They were being taxed like never before without representation. They were under military occupation with thousands of British troops in the colonies. And if they had a grievance, they didn't have a jury of their peers. They had a British naval judge. And that's what Thomas Jefferson wrote about in the Declaration of Independence, for protecting them by mock trials and for depriving us the benefits of trial by jury. We are so blessed to have the 5th through 8th Amendments of the Constitution. It's why teaching kids the Bill of Rights is so important. But Americans are so detached from our history. They've lost sight of how important fair trials are. And it makes me think of the writings of Thomas Jefferson, who believed that schools should be set up for the sole purpose of teaching children their rights. But that's the opposite of what American schools are doing today. It's why I teach a course on real U.S. civics and write books on the First Amendment, right to bear arms, fake news, corruption of the banking system, and so much more.
So you guys get the idea. Really glad to have you guys all here today with us. So Max, my normal routine is to say hi to everyone in the sidebar. You know what I mean? That's like proper.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. No,
a
lot of streamers do that.
What's up, Roger? Thanks for joining us. OTVO, Kevin, as always, thank you, BZ Watchdog. Thank you, Joseph. Rick Jonesy, yo, yo, yo. And then Christopher, give me a bunch of ones if you missed Chili. Let's hear it for Chili. Free Chili, give me a bunch of FCs to free him. Let's get him out of there. Come on, he doesn't belong there, guys.
Yeah.
All right. Lazy Hayes, Frida Torriale. And let's talk a little bit about not necessarily the sovereign belief system, but I know that a lot of you probably figured, oh man, they mentioned Admiralty and Maritime and all this stuff. They must be sovereign citizens. And that's how sad it is that we can't even talk about our own history without being accused of being something by the lamestream press and the Leviathanic education system. That's why I love having Max on. And Max, so tell us a little bit about what you think about this video that we just saw.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that the vice admiralty jurisdictions are a relatively interesting subject. I mean, they were for regulating and controlling commerce. And when the founding fathers established, like you said, the 5th through 8th Amendments, the 6th Amendment is what guarantees the right to a trial. The 5th Amendment is you're not supposed to self-incriminate, or you don't have to self-incriminate yourself. You don't have to talk. These vice admiralty courts kind of remind me of the tribunals that Abraham Lincoln enacted, where you just had one guy, no jury, and that was the end of it. Whatever your conviction was your conviction. You didn't have a fair trial. And it's interesting because he said, in the actual amendment of the Constitution, it said that there shouldn't be mock trials, because mock trials are sham trials. They're not real trials. And so that's what their point was with the British, is that they were having sham trials. And Congress's main jurisdiction was supposed to be like over the commerce between the states, and it was supposed to be the new vice admiralty, the one giant vice admiralty court system almost. And these days it's doing so much more than it should.
Well, I think that that's definitely a good observation, Max. And what I want to do also is to sort of give a historical background of probably why there are so many different theories about what types of jurisdictions we're operating under and whether or not certain courts are within their jurisdiction or without their jurisdiction. And I hear all these things. And so today we're not really going to go to that, but we are going to talk about the history of the vice admiralty courts and how they got here. Well, when we were still colonies. And Max is really great to have on because he is like a full-on historian and he gets it. And hey, thanks, Gloria. So the Townshend Revenue Act of 1767 is where a lot of this started, although the colonies did have, let me open this up for you. So I don't know if you can see this. So Max, can you tell us what this bad chicken is right here, this thing? Admiralty or?
Oof. No, I don't know a whole lot about it, actually. I mean, I know they had them in those specific courts and that they were representative of the British Crown, like the power of the British Crown over the colonies. I think we discussed before that they established charters. So almost it's like these colonies were like mini corporations under the one big giant British Crown, which in and of itself is a corporate entity.
That's right. The king even had his own corporations, like the what was it called? Gosh, I get the name, but there was this corporation that was all over the world that was controlled by the king. Somebody put it in the sidebar if you know what I'm talking about. But we can see here that Admiralty Maritime Law was formally adjudicated in England as early as 1360. A mace in the shape of an oar made of silver was used to symbolize the power of the British Admiralty courts. It was commonly carried by the courts martial and placed before the judge during trials. So that's what this bad chicken is right here. And this is apparently a replica of one that's inside of Washington, D.C., because after the War of Independence, the United States, the newly formed United States, conferred the federal courts as admiralty jurisdiction courts. And then this same oar that is either the same oar that was from the royal courts or the colonial courts was then transferred to the federal courts. And many speculate that that's one of the reasons why people say that the federal courts are really vice admiralty British courts operating under like the Bank of England or whatever, because I don't know. There's a lot of theory. I don't know. What do you have to say about any of this, Max?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I suppose if they have the oars inside the courts, you could actually make those kinds of allegations because that's what they were specifically designed for. And if you want to paint it as history, you should put them in museums, not in the courts.
Oh, that's
you want to paint it as history rather than as something that exists and is pertinent today, you wouldn't put it in the courts.
Wow. Yeah.
So I get it. I understand why people would say that. I mean, it's why people are like all speculative around the whole District of Columbia Organic Act of 1871, which was passed when Ulysses S. Grant was president. It's because if you read some of the language of that bill, it appears to establish a corporate government that exists in D.C. We discussed it before, the span of 10 miles. And people are like, so why is that? I mean, some people think we're participating in corporate elections rather than just elected leaders in a constitutional republic, And so if we were really a constitutional republic, these people might say, then why do we have all these things in the court?
Those are great observations. Give me a bunch of ones if you think Max is onto something, because I think that we need to hear all sides and understand the underpinnings of why things are the way they are today. And I think that if we look at what's going on, we can see that there was a commercial intent after this Townshend Act. What was it called? The
Townshend Act of 1767.
Yes. So good. So that I love that. So the Townshend Act, what that was the colonists didn't like that they had to keep paying for the king's endless wars. That's really what this was all about. And so the Townshend Act basically conferred admiralty jurisdiction, basically converted everyone into like a commercial case. And so that's why I think probably, what do you say, Max? Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I think that the founding fathers tried to get everybody off of being this commercial corporate entity, this individual person, and some of the people that some people that you might talk to allege that our congressmen passed these treasonous bills that got us back to that very system that our founding fathers fought against, which was making people corporate entities that could simply be hauled into court for not paying their taxes. What do you have today, right? You don't pay the Internal Revenue Service your income tax, you're going to court. It's the same as before. And that's either sales tax or an income tax. So they were revolting over a stamp tax, over a sugar tax, over this Townshend Act, which was like a sales tax. They were revolting over 3% in total taxes. And today we're taxed about 39% of our total income under this Biden administration, at least. I mean, under Trump, it was 37, but under each administration before, it's been at least 30-something%, which is much higher than it was when they were fighting this.
Absolutely. I agree with you. I'm befuddled at the whole situation. And then when you come back to this, and then you hear people say everything that the sovereign citizen movement says is all just, they don't have any basis. They're all crazy people. And then you look at this kind of stuff, you can see that they might be wrong on some things, but it looks, at least historically, they did their research. And I guess that's the problem that we learn from Brett Pike, right? About people not doing research.
Yeah, they gatekeep this information. I mean, they don't even tell you about what happened during the time of the Federal Reserve Act. I mean, England obviously has always had a central bank. The Rothschilds family. Okay, I'm not, that A word that people want to call me because I'm mentioning them by name, but they set up them and then the Myers set up a huge banking empire in Europe, and they established central banks all over Europe. Once they conquered Europe, their next target was the United States of America. And part of the reason why I believe America wanted to leave the crown is because they were on a central banking system. And when the USA started, we were off that central banking system. And, this goes even through Andrew Jackson. I mean, I could even argue that Andrew Jackson was a man of faith because he fought the renewal of the charter of the Second Bank of the United States. He said, if I renew this, I am robbing the people. This bank and these corporate interests seek to control the Congress. They seek to wrap their tentacles around this American government and not make us a constitutional republic. And once they got the Federal Reserve going, that really just accelerated that, and the problem multiplied by a factor of 10.
Wow, give me a bunch of ones for that one, guys. That was killer. I'm amazed at all the knowledge that you have, to be honest. And I definitely want to have you on more.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's interesting because some might say, right, during Woodrow Wilson's time, and I'm no like big conspiracy dude or anything, but he actually had an affair with a woman that came out after he died. I was wondering if that was a way of the people that wanted him to get the central bank going. I wonder if that was used as leverage against him.
Oh man, you got to know it was, right?
Got to know it was, right? Yeah. Because I mean, in that time, how embarrassing and shameful would it have been to be the leader of your nation and have had an illicit affair outside of your marriage? And so typically what they do with these politicians, even up to today, there's nothing new today. Yeah. There's always something that they have on them. And if it's embarrassing to a certain point, the way that they keep it hidden is by asking these people for favors.
Yep. Absolutely. I think that we all know that that's what's going on, and our government's out of control, and not everything is a conspiracy theory. And so Max, that's why I'm so grateful that you came on, because now we can sort of explain to people, okay, what is Vice Admiralty and where's all this coming from? So we know that the British Crown brought it over because of the, what is it, the Townshend Act? Is that what we decided
Yeah,
on?
the 1767 Townshend Act.
All right. So let me just read this to you. The Constitution's framers were familiar with the concept of a separate and specialized admiralty jurisdiction. Prior to the founding, the British Crown commissioned vice admiralty courts in the American colonies. These courts, which were subordinate to English admiralty courts, exercised jurisdiction independent from the colonial courts of common law and equity over maritime cases arising in the colonies. So what ended up happening is the colonists had some admiralty courts, but they were for things that were of a commercial nature. But what ended up happening is the English brought these admiralty courts onto the land and started making anything that had to do with collecting taxes. Sound like an Article 1 court to you? Some of you guys that know what I'm talking about. Same
Yeah.
kind of deal, right? Okay,
Right.
so same kind of deal. So I think there are so many similarities, including the passing of the oar and all that stuff, right? The silver admiralty oar, that's probably where a lot of this comes from. So I just want to share that with you guys. I mean, I'm not saying that anything is valid or not valid about any of these theories that are going around, because they all have to be tested. But just to outright dismiss something, to me, is the most tyrannical thing you can do. You have to do your own research. There's a Brett Pike says something about that. Logical fallacies or something. How does that work?
Yeah. You love Brett Pike's videos of the logical
Oh
fallacy.
man, they're so good. I want you to tell the audience, because they're so
They
good.
they are so good. Typically, like there's the straw man argument, for example, where people can misconstrue another person's argument. Basically, you change an argument of another person into something that it was not. Then there's ad hominem, where you personally attack someone, you attack their character rather than actually going after any of the points that they actually made. And then there's like appeal to authority. And that's where, you say, well, somebody's got a PhD, someone's got a JD or whatever. Therefore, they're expert in that field. Therefore, we must listen to them with everything they say, because they have all the facts and nobody else can actually challenge that narrative. And then what else? I'm forgetting a couple of others off the top of my head right now, but I know that if you put them on the screen, I would know what they meant.
No, that was excellent. I don't even think I can remember my general orders anymore. The fact that you can remember something that you saw on a video is shocking to me.
Yeah. Well, they're studying beyond that too. And I've studied the logical fallacies. So, and so when I came across this video, I was prepared for that. So that's a good thing.
So I want to keep reading, and then I want you to jump in if you can see any similarities or anything that you want to talk about. So in the years leading up to the American Revolution, the jurisdiction of independent vice admiralty courts led to disputes between the colonists and the crown. For example, the colonists objected to the crown's prosecution of colonists in vice admiralty courts without a trial by jury. So that was a big deal, the trial by jury, right? And we get trial by jury in most of our courts, but then like Max, I don't know if you know the whole deal about Chili's case, but he didn't get a trial by jury. In this case, it appears as though he waived his right to a trial by jury. Apparently he would have been able to have one, but in a standard single misdemeanor case, you may not have the right to a trial by jury in Nevada, right?
Yeah. For certain misdemeanor cases, like if you're going to get less than like 6 months or a year in jail, depending on what states, you don't usually get a trial by jury. You usually just get a judge.
Right. So one of my theories is that the sovereign citizen style or type of so-called movement has taken the idea that the trial by jury not being allowed, say like for a traffic infraction, shows that it's an admiralty or a commercial court. And, I see a lot of validity in that argument. I think it's more of an administrative action. There was a gentleman a long time ago who recommended you do in California request for an administrative law hearing under Penal Code Section 9, and then take that and then go to the clerk or whoever is in charge of disbursements or whatever it is, and have them stamp a default, and then you enter that into a demur and file that demur with the traffic court. I never had to do that, but I've heard that they were successful. So I know that, and it was based upon it being a commercial transaction. That's why I'm telling you guys this. So I'll keep reading really quick here. For allegedly violating, so it was a trial without a jury for allegedly violating British tax law, the 1765 Stamp Act. And then the First Continental Congress delegates cited this extension of Admiralty Court jurisdiction beyond their ancient limits. Beyond their ancient limits is one of the major grievances against Great Britain. So there you go, guys.
Yeah.
It was. Go ahead, Max. Talk to us about what you think about this.
Right. So I think the main idea was settling commercial disputes between individuals in different colonies. So you mentioned like the maritime thing. It's interesting because we have the supremacy clause in the Constitution. So the whole maritime stuff has always been like the federal government has always set the rules for that. Like if two states have different conflicting laws, then they go with what the federal government has to say about that. And I think the same is kind of the situation here. If two colonies basically almost look at them as the founding fathers almost looked at them as like states when drafting the Constitution. It's almost like when there were disputes between two colonies, it was up to the central government to come and adjudicate that and to settle that dispute. And that was the whole thing behind creating a Congress. That was the whole idea behind federalism, creating a strong federal government. But it was not to bring in citizens and prosecute them for failing to pay their taxes. And so what you said, it was a mass breach. It was tyranny. It was an extension, a huge extension of authority with regards to the courts that they should not have been given.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because they went beyond like the Magna Carta and everything. The colonists were pretty much independent, and they didn't have any representation in the Parliament, anyways. And so here we are. They're objecting. They're saying, "Look, we still love England. We still want to be English. We want to be part of the British realm. We just want you to treat us fairly under the Charter." So they had an ancient charter, the Magna Carta and other charters. Remember, one of the kings had his head chopped off, right?
Right. Well, it's interesting because at the bottom of the paragraph, it talks about that the same Admiralty courts were basically converted into tribunals when the Articles of Confederation were made. And that's the point that I made, is that the Admiralty courts were just an early version of tribunals. Because so instead of actually just now prosecuting taxes, now they get to prosecute people that were captured during war. And that's what Abraham Lincoln did with the Southerners. He was treasonous, I believe, in suspending habeas corpus during the middle of the Civil War, and and obviously and habeas corpus is like, hey, a body's being held, like this guy needs a hearing, right? And so Abraham Lincoln wasn't granting that. And so I guess it's the same thing with this. It's not a fair trial if you don't have multiple people establishing a unanimous consensus. It is a biased, treasonous thing. And I think this is exactly the kind of thing that the founding fathers were trying to prevent in the Constitution. They wanted to do away with tribunals. They didn't want to allow just the suspension of rights just because war came about, even though that's what Abraham Lincoln tried. And of course, checks and balances eventually, got to him because the Supreme Court overturned a lot of what he did with suspending habeas corpus.
Right, that is true. But he still suspended the habeas corpus and was able to pack the Southern courts with unelected representatives who in turn voted in the 14th Amendment. So it was interesting, the state constitutions had to be rewritten in order to conform with the 14th Amendment. A lot of people don't know that.
I mean, I do remember California specifically being rewritten. California adopted a constitution back in 1850, and then they had to, because that's when they got into the Union. So then they had to draft and adopt a constitution, but then they had to rewrite it back in 1878. They had to redo it all. And I wonder if that was specifically because they had to conform to the 14th Amendment Equal Protection Act. It's interesting because I mean, in local government class, they'll teach you that your state's constitution had to be rewritten, but they won't tell you why.
Can you read this?
Yeah,
Matt?
sure. Yeah, there you go.
Can you read it for us, for the audience?
Yes, it says vice admiralty courts existed throughout the empire. They served one purpose only, and that's what I just said. They just served one purpose, not three, to resolve disputes among merchants and seamen. At the end of the French Indian War, 11 such courts were in operation in British America. Each court served a certain region. Some of them handled several colonies, while Pennsylvania had its own. These courts were different in operation from the common law courts. It's interesting because we have 12 Federal Reserve banks, and now you look there's 11 courts here, and then there's one main court back in the homeland.
That is interesting.
But yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting. I didn't know that. They did not use a jury system. The judge heard all evidence and testimony and handed down a ruling. And then for most of the history of the colonies, these courts were occupied only with commercial matters. I think it's only.
Yeah. Now stop right there. So Max, do you kind of see the argument? I mean, it's no trial by jury, and that's how a lot of traffic courts are. So it makes sense that people who are learned and have done their research might think that these are just commercial type courts. They're infractions. They're not really crimes. They're not really anything. It should be administrative, but it's not. What's the deal here? What do you think, Max?
Yeah, some people say courts are banks because they take your money.
Well, what is Chile said something that what they want to do is they want to pull you, they want to put you in the torture cuffs, throw you in the dungeon, and take all your money. I think that's what he says. Put it in the comments if that's what you guys think he says.
Oh, and I don't know. Maybe I should insert my YouTube by my name tag here. That might be appropriate for me to do.
Yeah, you guys got to go to @Max. Oh no, Outrage Teen. Hold on, let me put that in here.
No worries.
I'm gonna scroll it really quick.
And actually, now this is convicting me to talk more about this, because now we're going through and we're reading an article. This is something I usually do about the modern day news, but I think there we go. Even the so-called old stuff, is really important to figure out how we even arrived to this point.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's really great that you have taken an interest in trying to understand the amazing history of the Americas and the colonies. Remember, the colonists wanted to be good Englishmen, but they also were fiercely independent, and they were self-sufficient. They didn't have these control systems that are in place now, where they can control you by your phone and track you, where they don't allow you to grow food anymore. They arrest you and put you in jail probably for collecting rainwater. I mean, to people like Max and I mean, Max, can you think of any reason why, other than being despotic?
No, you know what? I think that I think they are just doing it to be controlling after all. I don't think they want us collecting our own water, because they want you getting the alleged fluoride water from the grocery store. I can't confirm or deny that, but there are some people that have definitely done some heavy research on it. And they're like, well, there's fluoride in the water you're drinking.
You never
I'm
know,
not one
man.
of those guys, but I've heard of it. I don't doubt it.
Okay, so I've got this next slide here, and it basically talks about how at the end of the French and Indian War, there were, some colonial admiralty courts, but I've got to point out that they had colonial judges. And so because of the colonists not wanting to pay for the king's wars, the king wanted to pass these crazy rules that made it harder, and the colonial judges weren't going along with it. So, he just said, okay, screw it. Vice Admiralty on the land, and we're going to go ahead and deal with these commercial matters with the Vice Admiralty judge from the British Crown. And the colonists are saying, well, we don't have representation in the Crown. We have a representation here in the colonies under our charters. That's what they're saying to the king, right? And right, Max? Isn't that kind of what's going on here?
Yeah, I mean, under the king, they're saying you got to pay your fair share, right? They say no, pay your fair share, bro. Otherwise, you're going to court.
That's great. So here. So what does it say right here, Max?
Judges were appointed from the local population. It says appointed rather than elected. I don't know why that's used, but it says the local population. So I think they should be a bit more specific about who that is, and paid from the treasuries of the colonies served. And that makes sense, right? Because government people like your congressmen are obviously paid from the treasury. That's where they're compensated from.
But that, again, that was, I believe, these were different from the common law courts, and that's why people were getting pissed off, because they're trying to make everything commercial so the king can regulate it. So there's a history behind, right? Yeah. Anyways, go ahead, man. Talk to me.
There's the the Continental Congress was just basically doing his bidding for a while, kind of just handing down mandates that were coming from Britain, and then I think it's funny because eventually they all just kind of had enough of the king dictating to them, and said, "All right, we'll do something different here."
Mhm.
And then it's interesting. Here's the next paragraph. It says. During the French and Indian War, their jurisdiction was expanded to the business of condemning enemy ships impounded by the British and to the disposal of their contents. So, that's funny. They gave themselves the power to take other countries' ships and to get rid of their goods. It's like plundering. It's like the evil empire, so to speak. They
Well,
said,
in their minds, they were at war with the French and stuff, so they probably just. I think this is when they had the privateers or the pirates and stuff too. Like you could be like a Blackwater.
if you play Assassin's Creed, you
Yeah.
probably know a little bit about that.
Get your own ship and be Blackbeard.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, but I'm just because I don't want to spend too much time on this, because I'm trying to find. Okay, so the colonists argued. This is what I wanted you to talk about here.
They argued that the lack of trial by jury was an infringement of their constitutional rights, which didn't exist at the time. However, the distinction was minor in practice because all of the judges were drawn from the local population. A provision of the Currency Act established a super vice admiralty court in Halifax, Nova Scotia in 1764. The Currency Act, I wonder why they call it the Currency Act when it has to do with the court.
Right. But the big one is that they finally replaced the local judges from one sent directly from England, and that pissed off the colonists big time.
Yeah. No. Oh, because it kind of sounded so I guess what they were saying is the process was a bit more democratic at one point.
Yes, and also that the Admiralty courts that were operated by the colonists were basically courts of limited jurisdiction for things that had to do directly with commerce. And back then, everything wasn't considered to be commerce. Commerce was typically considered profit severed from corporate capital. So kind of like how it's supposed to be now. But anyways, I digress a little bit. So let's look here. So I don't know if any of this is any. The legal concept of the vice admiralty courts was that the defendant was assumed guilty until he proved himself. Okay,
so
boom, there you go.
Fathers flipped that on its head.
Yeah, do this for us. I'm going to put it in the sidebar for people to read too, but read that for us, Max, please.
The legal concept of the vice admiralty courts was that a defendant was assumed guilty until he proved himself innocent. Failure to appear as commanded resulted in an automatic guilty verdict, which is crazy, right? It's nuts, right? Because, obviously they flipped it on its head. They said with the Constitution, you're innocent until you're proven guilty. That's the whole idea of that's the whole concept of trial by jury. And then I forget what charge is it that you get if you don't appear in court. There's a different charge for that now.
Like failure to appear, bench warrant, or something like that.
Yeah, there's failure to appear. Right. So it's interesting because in this country, rather than having a guilty verdict, you're supposed to get a charge for failing to appear. Right. So you're not even guilty for that charge until you're also tried for that charge too. So.
Right. That is true. That is interesting that you say that. It's used as a tool to bring people before the jurisdiction of the court who otherwise would just stay away and be fugitives from justice.
Yeah, but that is more fair than saying you're automatically guilty if you don't appear, like what were this, you don't know what the circumstances were behind them not appearing. I mean, you don't.
That's true. I mean, you've got to, governance and the Constitution and our natural rights. We all have a different point of view, and we all understand that we have to regulate ourselves as much as possible, and then we have to determine how much help do we want from a local government, for example, or a federal government when it comes to protecting ourselves. Because I think, like Max believes, if we try and be better stewards, correct me if I'm wrong, Max, but if we try and be better stewards, there'll be less crimes, there'll be less problems. We try to look after each other, at a personal level, there'll be less issues. And we teach our youth to the classics, right? Wouldn't that be nice? Isn't that what you were kind of saying? Like
I would
learn
love to teach them the
cursive, right?
classics. I don't really think any Americans even read through the Constitution. And I've got a pocket Constitution. I've read through it plenty of times. And I think it's relatively important for them to know their history. And they don't teach them those patriotic, they don't teach them those core values. And I think they stopped a long time ago, right? I think that many people would suggest that our country was lost completely about 150 years ago. When they started bringing in the banking systems, when they started turning our government into something that it shouldn't have been. And so I don't even think that they were taught the patriotic values, because if they were, there would have been a whole lot of hell. I think January 6th would have been completely minuscule to whatever that event would have been. No, I'm being serious. I think if they were actually taught their patriotic values all the way through to that point, yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. 1871, for those of you who know 1871, 1913, clear dates, right? I think if you had really patriotic people who knew what was going on, they weren't ignorant, they were paying attention, man, January 6th would seem like nothing. Seriously. By the way, I don't need to be on a list, but if you're going to put me on a list, then nothing I can do about it now.
That's funny.
Yeah. Yeah. Put me on a list. Just don't put me on a hit list. All right.
Oh man, that's great. That is funny. So here, let's get back over here, Max, and take a look at this.
All right.
This bad chicken right here. Should I make this bigger for everybody, or do you want us to sort of keep the window open so we can kind of talk to you and you can see our faces? Give me a bunch of ones.
This. I like how we
like this one. All right. Give me a bunch of ones if you think Max is right. Give me a bunch of ones. Give me a bunch of 2s to free chili. Give me a bunch of 3s if you've already subscribed to BZ Watchdog, because if you haven't, give me a bunch of 1s. You're going to do it right now. Go ahead, Max.
Give us a bunch of 4s if you want billionaires to pay their fair share.
Yeah. And give me a bunch of 5s if you're going to subscribe to Outraged Teen, so you can hang out with, so you can check out some of Max's videos where he chases Gavin Newsom around. where he audits Gavin Newsom.
And soon I'm going to be talking about this, and we got to talk about auditing our court system.
This is great. So anyways, talk about this, dude.
He said 5. Oh no. I don't want higher taxes. All right, go ahead.
So I'm going to let you just sort of read this bad chicken, and I'm going to remove myself from the stage, and then you just go ahead and talk about it. And I'm going to go ahead and stop when you tell me to stop, as I sort of move the cursor and scroll up and down. All right.
Okay. All right. Colonists' joy over the repeal of the Stamp Act and what they saw as their defense of liberty did not last long. The Declaratory Act of 1766 had articulated Great Britain's supreme authority over the colonies, and Parliament soon began exercising that authority. In 1767, with the passage of the Townshend Acts, a tax on consumer goods in British North America, colonists believed their liberty as loyal British subjects had come under assault for a second time. All right, here we go. Lord Rockingham's tenure as prime minister was not long, so it was a year. Rich landowners feared if he were not taxing the colonies, Parliament would raise their taxes instead. Yeah, you got to pay your fair share, sacrificing them to the interests of the merchants and the colonists. This is why you don't believe a single politician that says pay your fair share. Anyways, I digress. King George III duly dismissed Rockingham. William Pitt, also sympathetic to the colonists, succeeded him. However, Pitt was old and little with gout. His Chancellor of the Exchequer, Charles Townshend, whose job was to manage the empire's finances, took on many of his duties. So hold on. So what we have here is the same guy that was managing the finances was supposed to take on the duty as prime minister. That's interesting. So the prime minister had the power of the purse and the executive power. First among these was raising the needed revenue from the colonies to pay off Britain's ballooning war debt and interest. Let's see. Townshend's first act was to deal with the unruly New York Assembly, which had voted not to comply with the Quartering Act. Obviously, okay, so actually there's some context behind this. So the Third Amendment says you don't have to quarter soldiers in your houses, because what they were doing back in the day is they were making people quarter war soldiers in their houses. So the government was telling people that they had to do that. And so the Third Amendment came from that, like, hey, the government shouldn't be telling people when to quarter soldiers. All right. So anyways, continued. In response, Townshend proposed the Restraining Act of 1767, which disbanded the New York Assembly until it agreed to pay for the garrison's supplies, which it eventually did. The Townshend Revenue Act of 1767 placed duties on various consumer items like paper, paint, lead, tea, and glass. These British goods had to be imported since the colonies did not have the manufacturing base to produce them. Townshend hoped the new duties would not anger the colonists, since they were external taxes, not internal ones like the Stamp Act. In 1766, in arguing before Parliament the repeal of the Stamp Act, Benjamin Franklin had stated, "I never heard any objection to the right of laying duties to regulate commerce, but a right to lay internal taxes never supposed to be in Parliament, as we are not represented there." The Indemnity Act.
So hold on really quick. So that's what we were talking about. So that's where taxation without representation comes from. I just wanted to throw that in there for you, Max, because some people, you take it for granted, but some of the people in here may not remember from so far back in time. But that's what that was all about, is our government, our people here were self-governing. They had no representation over in Britain. They were passing all these laws to pay for their endless wars, the king's endless wars. So here, go ahead. Keep talking, man.
Yeah, so that's crazy. That's wild that people don't know that. I think they should. I remember, I mean, you may remember being able to read in a school textbook, maybe something like that, but it doesn't ever go into depth like these things do. And then you have, let's see, I'll keep reading. The Indemnity Act of 1767 exempted tea produced by the British East India Company from taxation when it was imported from Great Britain. Actually, that makes sense because India was a British colony. When the tea was re-exported to the colonies, however, the colonists had to pay taxes because because of the Revenue Act. Some critics of Parliament on both sides of the Atlantic saw this tax policy as an example of corrupt politicians giving preferable treatment to specific corporate interests, creating a monopoly. The sense that corruption had become entrenched in Parliament only increased colonists' alarm. So, wow, I mean, so they were giving preferential treatment to the company based in India, but they weren't giving that same treatment to the colonists. The Revenue Act also gave the Customs Board greater powers to counteract smuggling. It granted writs of assistance, especially search warrants, to customs officials who even suspected the presence of contraband goods, which also opened the door to a new level of bribery in colonial harbors, furthermore, to ensure compliance. Wow. Wow, this is a lot of stuff you don't learn in school. This, like the Stamp Act, the Townshend Acts produced controversy and protests in the American colonies. Yeah.
So go ahead, Max.
They didn't want to enforce this, what Parliament was passing down. And
Right.
but yeah, and that's interesting because obviously the colonies weren't sending anyone to Parliament. So that's what Benjamin Franklin meant when he said, we have no representation. It's not like they expanded Parliament so that they could say, hey, each of the 13 colonies get each of the 13 colonies get 2 or 3 different people that get to represent them. There was none of that. There was none of that. And so Benjamin Franklin said, what is this? Our voices aren't being heard here. In fact, it's everything contrary to that. We hate this. We hate this government. And not many people teach you that, or schools teach you that it was specifically the Stamp Act that led to that.
Yeah. And the Stamp Act got repealed. So as I recall, and correct me if I'm wrong in the sidebar, it looks like William knows what he's talking about here.
It was repealed because there was too much backlash.
And so the Townshend Act basically just brings this admiralty court on the land. And then a lot of people say that paddle, that silver paddle, was passed on from the British crown or whatever onto the federal jurisdiction. And that, like, tax courts, because I don't even know, do tax courts give you a trial by jury? I mean, I don't even want to know. I know it's an Article I court, right?
So, do the tax courts give you trial by jury? In the United States, I'm not 100% sure. I have to look that up.
I think they do, because I remember Wesley.
I would say yes.
Wesley Snipes, right? Yeah. So
yeah.
So I don't know if you can. Yeah.
I would say yes. I was going to say yes, but I just wanted to confirm before saying that. But yes, I believe so. Yeah,
because I don't know if you could. Because I think that Wesley Snipes had a trial by jury, so I think it would be hard to say that they're an admiralty court. I'm just trying to, try to understand things based on the historic roots of how things.
Yeah, it might be hard. I mean, there's obviously pros and cons to all these arguments that can be made. Let's see. Oh, here we go. What do we have here?
So it's from a Boston newspaper that highlights how women were encouraged to take action by boycotting. Women were encouraged to take action by boycotting British goods. That's kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
The writer encouraged women to avoid British tea, bohea, and green hyson and linen, and to manufacture their own homespun cloth. So that's another thing that Brett Pike talks about all the time too, that really gets me. He's like, you can just like make your own stuff, and then you don't have to be dependent on the government for anything. And then you see how they're cracking down on like the organic farmers now. Like, man, you can see it with your own eyes. They do not like people being off their grid.
I'm sure the British didn't like this either.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like, why aren't more people outraged, Max? I mean, talk to us. What's going on?
They're ignorant. They're not taught this in the educational systems. The educational systems will hide this on purpose. I think a lot of the teachers teach that the Constitution is bad. They speak illy of it. And that's even the way that they were indoctrinated. So they're just passing it down to future generations.
Yeah, I think that's probably true, right? It's that Prussian education system that the Rockefellers brought here.
Yeah, I want a nation of workers, right? But I want a nation of workers, not just people working for employees, but people working for the system. I want people's minds working for the system, not just their bodies.
Yeah, I was really alarmed, Max. I mean, I know you're younger than me, but we had to learn how to write cursive, and I always found it handy when I was over in Europe and when I was in Scotland, and when I was going through old documents of the United States. That knowing how to read cursive really comes in handy to understand your past. And it just seems like they're trying to erase our past in so many ways. It just, you feel it,
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, they taught very little cursive in 3rd grade when I was in school, and past that, there wasn't much of anything. There was nothing at all. Nothing in 4th grade, nothing in 5th grade, nothing in 6th. I mean, nothing past that, just a couple weeks of cursive in 3rd grade, and they called it enough. There's no comprehensive like standard or curriculum or requirement to graduate knowing cursive.
That's pretty wild.
Yeah.
So, and then you look at like how it was back then, like the women were encouraged to not, because the women, so I guess it's interesting because like in my household, like my wife handles all this stuff, and and I just try to focus on plugging away to feed the family, right? Same thing here.
Get some money.
Don't buy the tea. Don't buy the linen. Try to make your own homespun cloth.
Mhm.
And young ladies in the town that live around, let me advise you, since money's so scarce, at times are growing worse. Like they were rebelling openly, like they were pissed that they had their freedom taken away. They were losing their right to trial by jury. It was a real problem. I mean, they don't teach any of this stuff in school, man. It's wild.
Mm-hmm.
It's
In
wild.
Massachusetts in 1768, Samuel Adams wrote a letter that became known as the Massachusetts Circular, sent by the Massachusetts House of Representatives. It's interesting to note how these states or these colonies had their own houses.
Yeah.
How there was a division of power. How there was a division of power before that even got introduced in the Constitution. Let's see. All right. Let's see. The letter laid out the unconstitutionality of taxation without representation and encouraged the other colonies to again protest the taxes by boycotting British goods. Adams wrote, "It is, moreover, the Massachusetts House of Representatives' humble opinion, which they express with the greatest deference to the wisdom of the Parliament, that the acts made there, imposing duties on the people of this province, with the sole and express purpose of raising a revenue, are infringements of their natural and constitutional rights,
Okay.
because
Wait, stop right there, Max. They're
natural.
natural and constitutional. Talk to us about that.
Natural. Well, a lot of the philosophies about the natural rights deviated from John Locke. And if you read the Federalist Papers, a lot of the founding fathers borrowed some philosophies from him. There are quite a few philosophers that have different beliefs about living in a natural world. It's interesting, even if you read like Plato's Republic, I think even some of the philosophies were borrowed from there. And I don't remember a lot of the tenets of it. I'll be honest. It's been such a long time since I've studied those, but much of what's actually in the Constitution is based on a lot of ancient concepts, whether you believe it or not.
Absolutely. And a lot of Scottish um, people, like free thinkers,
Mhm.
a lot of a lot of natural law theorists like John Locke. A lot of that went into our Bill of Rights, Declaration of Independence. Really interesting stuff. And
Mhm.
here
Absolutely.
here you see it. This was a real problem. They're like, look, you're violating our natural rights. And you don't hear people complaining. Like we're literally like having bills passed to extend domestic spying programs. It's just crazy that this is being allowed to happen. Warrantless stuff. It's wild to me. Well, they flood the southern border with people that we don't even know who they are, making us less safe, but they're surveilling us and they don't even know who these other people are,
If you're going to
making it
spy on them,
less
spy on
safe.
them. If you're going to spy
Yes.
on anyone, spy on them.
Yeah. Don't make the country less safe and then use the disaster that you create as an excuse to take away more of our rights. I mean, give me a bunch of ones if you agree with that. Does that sound like I'm some radical conspiracy theorist to think that if we had border security and we could have a normal pathway to citizenship where we could vet people, that we'd be safer? Am I a conspiracy theorist for thinking that? What do you think, Max?
Well, I think if the billionaires paid their fair share, these illegal immigrants could easily get all the free goods they want. No, just kidding.
That's
Like
classic.
Biden says, yeah, no. So we can all build back better here. But like you said, we're not really doing that when we have these spying programs. They extended FISA 702, and like there's a DSAC portal. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but there's a DSAC portal that basically makes it so like someone that buys a Bible or someone that does some sort of conducts some sort of religious activity, maybe they have a conservative ideology, is like listed as like a domestic terrorist. And I want to say there was a Department of Homeland Security document doing kind of like the same thing, where they were listing all kinds of these people that had specific religious and ideological affiliations as domestic terrorists.
That's right.
And,
That came out
and
on March 4th.
they came out with that on March 4th. So that's
Or May
relatively.
4th. May 4th. It came out on May.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, someone's handing down instructions within the bureaucracy. And I don't know what kind of power they even have to do that kind of thing, to designate, because it's interesting. George Bush, right? He gave these terrorist group designations to certain people. And you had the Supreme Court case, Boumediene versus Bush in 2006, where the Supreme Court decided that people were allowed to challenge their terrorist designations. And so if we were like a free and fair nation, there would be some sort of transparency between the three-letter agencies and the people, so that whoever's actually on one of those lists can challenge that designation.
Absolutely. And then all the people in the sidebar need to know that this is number 1, this is number 2, this is number 3, this is number 4. So Max, which one do you think it is if you were to number it? Number 1, number 2?
Let's see. I got to read the question here. So it says the Townshend Acts doubled down on the idea that the colonies should pay for Britain's war debt. However, the harsh legislation brought about which effect that the British government did not foresee. There's one answer, right?
Oh, yeah. Hold on. So there's only one answer. Is it 1, an increase in colonial manufacturing power, an increase in smuggling, more colonists moving back to Britain, or the alliance of the colonies? And I know what the answer is, but I want to know what you guys think. So
let me go with number 3.
Okay, so Max is going to go with number 3. Let's take a look, guys. What do you guys think? Okay, let's see in the sidebar here. So is it going to be, guys? Give me. So Max, let's do it by majority vote for the first one. We can go back and find the right answer if we're wrong. All right.
All right, sounds good.
All right. So guys, let's see. What do you guys want? Number 1,
1,
number
2, 3,
2,
or 4. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, or 4.
So Mama Lion wants number 4. And then which one did you want? You wanted number 2 or 3?
I said 3, but honestly, I think oh boy.
That was cool. That's a fire alarm. That's pretty cool. That was like a reality show kind of thing.
Yeah, I think honestly, now that I think about it, it's probably number 4. I would change my answer to number 4.
All right. So right now we've got a 1, a 4, a 2, a 3, a 4, and a bunch of them are saying 4s. And look, I'm going to throw in my lot with the 4s, by the way. I hope the fact that I have it checked didn't bias anyone. But let's check it out. Oh, boom. And I think we got it right. So BZ Watchdog. Yeah.
Disable the battery real quick here.
Hey, so BZ's got a free chili video in 3 minutes. So we're going to go ahead and close this bad chicken out pretty soon, because we've been doing this bad chicken for about 57 minutes. So guys, we actually got through everything, and I just want you to check out BZ Watchdog's show. So Max, BZ Watchdog's show is coming up. I want people to go check him out. He's doing a video in 3 minutes at BZ Watchdog.
You're on mute.
You and I got through pretty much everything we needed to get through tonight, Max. So I want you to say goodbye to everybody and tell everybody to like and subscribe to your channel and hit the smash and like button on every single one of the videos on your channel at Outrage Teen.
Yes, please and thank you. Please go to YouTube. We're already on YouTube, so it's pretty easy. Just go to the search bar, search Outrage Teen, one word. You can see it down here on the bar. And please subscribe, please like, and please share, because there's a share button on every video. I see your comments. For those of you that came to my channel from last time, thank you very much. I see the support. It's greatly appreciated. If you haven't already found my channel, then please go look it up, hit the subscribe button, and I look forward to seeing you guys all over there.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Max, for coming. And that was really cool to be able to hang out with all you guys for about an hour. Come on later tonight with me and Alan Beck about 9 p.m. Pacific. We're going to talk about his Ninth Circuit arguments. My buddy Alan Beck, he's a former Marine and also a Second Amendment rights lawyer. And he's argued multiple cases before the Ninth Circuit. So if you got some time, Max, come by. If not, catch us on the rewind. But it was really an honor to have you and a privilege. And everybody, thank Max for coming, please. Give me a bunch of 1s if you like it that Max showed up. Give me a bunch of 2s that you're going to like and subscribe to his channel at Outrage Teen. And everybody, you're all very, very welcome. Thanks for joining me. Make sure to go to BZ Watchdog at BZ Watchdog. Check out his show. He's going to show us some cool stuff. I'm going to get off this channel, and log in on my phone to check him out right now. Thanks again, Max. Make sure to like and subscribe. Make sure to save, because you never know when the thought police are going to take down this channel. Thanks, everybody.
Very much. Take
Bye.
care.